Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. I'm your host, Jack Foster, joined alongside Rick Butler and Ryan Shepard, as always, here coming at you on a Wednesday, October 9th edition here in the morning. Doing a little bit of last takeaways, final takeaways from Tennessee's loss to Arkansas, while before diving in to Florida, which is upcoming. Tennessee back in Neyland Stadium hosting the Gators this weekend. A big one given Tennessee's loss last weekend to the Razorbacks. Before we dive in, though, Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be back on here and ready to put a bow on the Arkansas game and ready to talk about Florida, which was already going to be a big game. Obviously, it's always a big game, Florida, around here, but it feels like an even different magnitude after that loss on Saturday.
Rick, how are you doing, my friend? A little different scenery today.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Jack. Ryan, good to see you guys. A little bit of a different scenery for me. I'm in a new spot. Just things were getting a little bit hectic at my other spot for the time being, but no, it's fun, and I'm glad to be here with you guys. I actually planned on wearing this collared. I got a collared shirt under this jacket, but it's a little bit cold, and I also wanted to give a shout out, man. A shout out to my 6-1 Powell Panthers last weekend. Absolutely annihilated the Carnes Beavers 38-0 goose egg. So if I have any Powell Panthers, if you're watching this, leave me a comment in the notes below. Our team is coming for the state championship this year. We got a bye week this week. We got to take care of the Central Bobcats next weekend. But the Powell Panthers are roll. So I decided today we're going to give a shout out to the Powell Panthers.
This is simply unbelievable. Rick is Knoxville high school football version of Kenny Chesney, because you just referenced him. I've heard you refer to them as your Central Bobcats many times, and as a person that comes from a Central Bobcat family, grandparents went there, dad went there, granddad coached football and baseball there. That is my East Tennessee football team, and you're out here. You claimed him. You claim one of their rivals in Powell. You're a front runner. You're an absolute front runner. It's disgusting.
Can I rephrase? This is next weekend is going to be the Butler Bowl. Okay. It's going to be the Powell Panthers versus the Central Bobcats. I did spend a couple years as a young life leader at Central. So I've walked those hallways. Okay. I've walked the practice field before, but also I lived right next to Powell. So I got to just walk over to those games. So I like to sink my teeth into the community that is Knoxville, Tennessee. I love this. I like to sink my teeth into the community. So I'm taking both, but this is going to be the Butler Bowl next Friday night. You're invited.
No, you are. I will, for the listeners, fair. I do know Rick has connections to both those schools, kind of. I do want to fact check you. Did you, in the 2 or 3 years that you lived, because you did live right by the high school, did you, as you just said, did you walk over to a single Powell football game in those 3 years? Because I'm hard-pressed to think you didn't do it one time.
I am so sick of Ryan calling out my stories this week. I am so sick of it. I am at the end of my line. I can't say anything without Ryan coming in with a fact check. No, one time, me and my friend Miles Collins, we tried to walk over to the game. We couldn't get in. We didn't have the right tickets. Apparently, you needed a yellow ticket, and we had blue tickets. So I tried once.
No, I
have never successfully made it into Powell Panthers Stadium.
I will give you. There's an effort that counts on that one. You did try to go to a game, so I'll give you some effort.
I did.
Wait,
I did.
So Rick, you haven't been to a game this year?
No.
Ever?
You going? Ever?
Yeah.
So you got to go next weekend.
I'm gonna try.
You're going, right?
Yes, I'm gonna try to go next weekend. You guys are invited. We'll bring the whole RTI crew. All right, we'll bring a flag, but we're gonna go, the three of us, to the Powell Central football game, and that's just how it's gonna be. If you're watching this, if you got a team, if you love the Panthers, if you hate the Panthers, let us know. I
got right here, 1973.
Wow.
50th year anniversary coin. Central Bobcats baseball state champions. I'm not really sure what the point of the coin is in here, because it just looks like it's a coin from 2023, but it's 50-year anniversary state champions, Central Bobcats.
That is very cool. Central Bobcats has some really impressive alumni who have walked those hallowed halls.
Well, Powell got a dominant win last weekend. Same cannot be said for Tennessee, despite our forecasting last week and how we struggled to come up with a scenario where Tennessee lost to Arkansas. Well, it happened. Tennessee lost by 5, 19-14 on the road. A dismal performance from the offense. We did call that early in the season, that if Tennessee was going to fall flat and lose a game that they shouldn't, it's going to be because of the offense, and probably at the root of it, the protection. You can argue it was Nico, the protection, the receivers. There's a lot to point the blame to here. Josh Heupel, too, with the offensive collapse in Fayetteville. I think the defense wasn't its best, but still played solid overall. Ryan, I'll start with you. What's something you're kind of thinking about still a couple of days removed from Tennessee's heartbreaking loss in Arkansas?
Well, something, going off what you just said about us not seeing a way for Arkansas to win the game. My big thing last week of, why I couldn't see Tennessee losing is that Arkansas does more dumb stuff to lose close games. And even if the game was close and Tennessee was on upset alert, I felt confident Tennessee would be able to win because of that. Well, I was wrong. Tennessee did way more, and Arkansas did some dumb stuff in that game. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
They played pretty clean in the fourth quarter, but as a whole, they did a lot of dumb stuff. I mean, one of Tennessee's 2 touchdown drives of the game, I think half of Tennessee's yards on it came on penalties. But Tennessee did more dumb stuff to lose. So that's really where I was wrong. To your question of what am I thinking about? I mean, I think it's obviously just offense and what went wrong, how did this happen, what's fixable, what isn't. And I think maybe 2 thoughts I've had or conclusions I've drawn from, conversations with people is, 1, I think Tennessee's just got to take some shots down the field. More shots down the field. Yep. You don't have to hit them, obviously you want to hit some of them, but they're just everybody, and it's not just been Arkansas. It feels like this has been the case for basically everybody Tennessee's played. They're just sitting on the short stuff, and that leads me into maybe a second thought that Tennessee is not running with much tempo right now, and I think each game's kind of been different. In some games, it's been intentional, and certainly there's an element against Arkansas where you're struggling to get first downs. It's hard to play with tempo. But, and we've, it's been a criticism of Josh Heupel's offense for a while. We heard it a ton after the 2022 season when, people were kind of poo-pooing the draft prospects of Tennessee's players on offense. It's not a very complex system in the sense of like the route trees that Tennessee runs. It's very basic route trees, very simple. Well, that's fine when you can play fast and you have the defense on the heels. When you don't have the defense on their heels and their feet in the ground and you don't have a bunch of playmakers at receivers, you don't have a bunch of guys that can win, you feel confident are going to overwhelm the other team with talent, that's when you get yourself in a lot of issues. And I think that's what Tennessee has right now. They have a bunch of average receivers. Their defenses are, to what I said earlier, they're sitting on the short stuff, and Tennessee's not running a whole lot of they're not surprising anybody with what they're running from a route tree standpoint. And that's never been the case. But when they're able to defenses are able just to sit on it and you don't have a bunch of elite receivers that can win those one-on-ones, that's how you end up in a lot of issues. So that's not rocket science by any means, but I think that is maybe a look at why Tennessee needs to be able to play with some more pace, with some more tempo to try to get defenses on their heels. And then maybe also just looking at the significance of needing to throw more deep balls, and then certainly you don't have to hit all of them, but need to hit a couple just to try to keep defenses a little more honest.
It looked like last year, all the horizontal stuff, it looked like Joe Milton was at quarterback, not necessarily just how the game played out, but it looked like what we saw last year with Joe Milton at quarterback, the play calling and the types of routes and, Josh Heupel's plan. It just felt like deja vu from last year, and this offense was just stuck in mud. So frustrating to watch, Rick. And I also think wide receiver injuries didn't help at all in this game. Dante Thornton, getting hurt. I feel like he's Tennessee's best playmaker at wide receiver. I feel like he can provide sparks unlike anyone else in the group, but the injuries played a part. It's obviously not something you can just completely put the struggles on, but it was a tough watch.
Yeah, no, it was. And something I was thinking about during the game, and I think I even might have turned and said it to him a couple times, but a lot of what Ryan's been saying over the last couple of weeks was sort of proven true in this game. And for Tennessee, it was sort of exposed to be true. I think that Tennessee is struggling right now with some wide receivers that can go out there and make plays on their own, create separation on their own. I do think that there are moments where, you need to ask your quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, to be able to throw guys open or make passes in tight coverage. But you've also got to get more from your receivers. And not that I didn't believe that from Ryan the last couple of weeks, but you certainly saw it against Arkansas. You go back to that North Carolina State game, people said that was going to be Tennessee's first true test. Well, the way that the Wolfpack season's gone, it's not really that case. Then you go to Oklahoma, and in some ways, Tennessee passed that with flying colors by being able to take out, that quarterback. But then at the same time, I just think that it's been tough for Tennessee to kind of continue that trend. I kind of lost my train of thought there. The way that I look at things is the receivers have struggled to make plays. The receivers have struggled a little bit to get open. The offensive line has struggled a bit. I think Nico's been a little bit timid because of that, especially in that Arkansas game. To me, that all just kind of compounds together to create these deficiencies in the passing game. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Ryan talks about the vertical passing game. I think that's right? You do need to take some more shots downfield. But a lot of these routes from Tennessee also feel like they're long developing crossing routes across the middle. I would like to see, hey, what about maybe some quicker passing that's not just a bubble screen to the outside, maybe something that's not just horizontal. Again, I've never called plays for a football team, but I wonder about how some of those things might affect this. Certainly tempo. Tennessee just was not going very fast last week. One of the other takeaways that I had from the game was, Tennessee's defense. Willie Martinez talked about this yesterday, but Tennessee let up 10 pass plays of 15-plus yards. That was some of the explosivity we talked about from that Arkansas offense last week. We talked about Taylor Green. We talked about Andrew Armstrong, who on a couple of those, I believe the 26-yarder and the 30-yarder, just made phenomenal plays. Jermon McCoy was in good coverage. He was blanketed all over them, but those two connected for some good plays right there on the sideline. So not all of those are going to be on Tennessee's fault, but certainly those explosive plays, they put Tennessee behind the 8 ball. And then one more thing about just being behind the 8 ball is that I thought that Tennessee got in that position on first down offensively throughout that game, and that really hurt. Ryan and I talked about the penalties a lot after the game, but the penalties were a tough hill to climb for Tennessee, right? They could be getting a couple yards on the ground, 3 yards, 4 yards on first down. But if that just brings you back to 2nd and 10, well, that's a tough position to be. If that was 2nd and 4 or 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, maybe, well, now you've got a little bit more wiggle room to work with. So I think that Tennessee's got to really emphasize winning first down against Florida this week to get that offense back up. But again, 19 points given up by the defense. You can win games in the SEC giving up 19 points. You're not going to win too many only scoring 14. So those are kind of some of the takeaways that I came away with just in these couple of days after the Arkansas game. I kind of got tongue-tied on that first point, but then I figured it all out again.
One thing I'll say. One thing I'll just say, going off of something both y'all said. Jack, you talked about the offense looking a lot like last year, and it did at times. One thing I will say, being there were more in breaking routes, stuff that Tennessee was trying to get over the middle. And to Rick's point of Nico being a little timid, I just think he's going to have to start letting it rip a little bit more on some of those throws. Look, like these receivers aren't fast. I don't think they're going to get a lot of separation. I think you just got to let it rip into some tight man coverage and hope guys like Brew and Chris Brazell, who are 6'4", 6'5", can make some contested catches. Because if they don't do that, I think this passing offense is going to struggle to have. I think that's the formula in the intermediate to them having success.
Yeah, and that's so weird is because it felt like Nico was, in the games Tennessee was leading comfortably, especially NC State. Nico's letting it fly across the middle of the field, and it's like, whoa, does not care. These are a little bit of dangerous passes, and he's still making them, but we didn't see that at all against Arkansas. So I agree.
Yeah, it was remember that pass again, and I know I'm talking about down the line competition here, but remember that pass week 1 against Chattanooga where he throws it over the middle?
Yes.
That one over the linebacker. We looked at that play, and I remember specifically saying, wow, if he's making that against Chattanooga, I think he might have a little bit of confidence, or at least he might be building confidence to be able to rip that across the middle against Oklahoma or against Arkansas. It's just something that we haven't seen. To Ryan's point right there, it's kind of like when your computer gets a little bit overworked, right? You've got 10 web browsers open, you got iMovie open, you got Audacity open. At some point of the day, your computer is just going to start slowing down as a total. Right? It's just it's a little too much overworked. Things aren't simply moving forward. To me, that was kind of the way that I saw the Tennessee offense, just for a couple of different reasons. Things were getting overworked, overclocked, and it just, it really hurt the efficiency of the unit overall. So I think those are good points.
Well, something that doesn't help any of this, just like, if you don't have virus protection on your computer, it's not going to get off to a good start. Tennessee didn't have good protection at tackle on Saturday night. And I think that's a big storyline right now Ryan. John Campbell comes back, get Lance Hurd out of the portal. The interior of the offensive line looks great, at least with Spraggs and Cooper Mays back. We had high hopes about this O-line going into the season, but the tackles didn't play well at all, and Nico was under duress a lot. And, is this offensive line overrated? Seems to be that way, especially along the edges. I'm worried about this big time, Ryan. Just the tackle spot specifically and the protection as a whole. Maybe this isn't a strong suit for the team.
No, I don't think it is, because I think the tackle spot's so bad. Heck, I think the interior played pretty good, especially in the second half. Really, the offensive line was and it was bad. Don't get me wrong. It was horrific in the first half. It was plenty good to win in the second half. But to your point, the offensive tackle play was bad again, and it was the first time in a real game, a big game, you had Lance Hurd and John Campbell. And Arkansas has a good pass rush, but it's nothing out of the ordinary that you're going to see in the SEC. So definitely worrisome. Definitely a major issue for Tennessee. And I think that's where, something I'll give Nico credit is while he was sacked 4 times, he extended a lot of other plays. It could have been a lot worse on a number of plays. So you're right, and that feels like an issue that's not going to go away. At least can be better for sure, but it's going to be something to monitor all season. And I don't know. I'm curious if Greg has talked about this any, Jack, but to me that seems like there's an issue across college football. It does not seem like a lot of good offensive line play this season.
No, there's not. Yeah, he has talked about that. And he's talked about how tackle is like tackle and receiver becoming the most important. Outside quarterback becoming the second, third most important positions in college football. Yeah, I was curious about the PFF grade. John Campbell, 47.4 to Lance Hurd, 42.2, 55 and 68 snaps respectively. It's just dreadful.
And I wonder what Tennessee's going to do to maybe try to mitigate that next week. Are they going to add in are they going to have the running back chip that side? Are they going to have a tight end try to play that spot? I don't know what they're going to try to do, but it'll be interesting to see if any adjustments do come here this week before Florida.
And I'll say they have been doing some max protect, but that doesn't help you too much when your receivers aren't very good and can't win one-on-one battles.
Can't use that 5 seconds to get open.
Yeah, well, then you got 3 guys being defended by six, 7 guys dropping into coverage. So it's compounding issue. You can try to fix one thing, but it makes it harder on another unit that's not thriving by any means.
And shout out Dylan Sampson. Where would this offense be without him? My goodness, he is an incredible player. He is just very good, and Tennessee's lucky to have him. One last thing I wanted to say about this, and it's not in the weeds at all. It's a very broad view of things. When you're 4th ranked Tennessee and you take a 14-3 lead,
yep,
after you've been dominated all game, especially in the first half, but because Sam Pittman's conservative coaching, other factors, Arkansas shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, you're lucky to be up 11 points. You just don't look back there. If you're 4th ranked Tennessee on the road against unranked Arkansas, you do not look back being up 14-3, and Tennessee let the game slip away after that. That's worrisome. Great teams don't do that, is what I'm saying.
No, they don't. You're absolutely right. And I don't know, there's things that you circle, that's not elite coaches don't drop games like that. And I remember we said it before the Florida game last year. Like, that's a game an elite coach, you win that game. And not just to be a crap on Josh Heupel. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a top 15 coach. But you talk about the void in coaching. And I ask anybody at home, do a top 5 head coaches list in college football. It's very difficult to do. And you feel like Josh Heupel is maybe a guy could potentially be on the precipice of that. I think we're seeing some reoccurring issues that make you think, maybe he's just a top 15 guy, which is certainly very good for where Tennessee's been the last decade. A lot better than anybody else they've had, but maybe not at that elite level.
Yeah, just the run defense not playing well in the fourth quarter. The Russell guy rumbling all over them there in that drive, and then of course Tennessee let Arkansas score. So maybe the final score is 16-14 if they just absolutely pull out all the stops to not let them score, right? So it's a little bit of a deceiving final. I think letting them score was the right call, but getting outscored 9-0 in the final quarter is just not it.
I did too. And look, I mean, Tennessee had a shot at the end zone a couple of times at the end of that game. They had a chance. So I don't think that was an extremely regrettable move. But I do think that maybe not kicking the field goal at the end of the first half was maybe a regret for the coaching staff. And again, Josh Heupel came after the game. He said that we need to be better starting first and foremost with me and the coaching staff. So there was accountability being taken after that. But to both of y'all's points, there were times in the game where you just kind of were scratching your head at what was going on. Josh Heupel obviously had his explanations or his reasoning in the moment. But again, there are a couple plays I think you can look at from that game and just kind of wonder if that had gone differently, how could that have changed the outcome? So we'll see. We'll never know, but we'll see.
Real quick, Ryan, is everything still achievable in your eyes for this Tennessee team? You see Alabama lose to Vanderbilt. It's like, chaos reigns every freaking week, especially so far this season. So I'm not necessarily just smashing the panic button for Tennessee season at all. I think they're still very much so playoff contenders, but maybe it changes my outlook that they can be very dominant and ultimately compete for a national championship.
Yeah, it's that. They can still make the playoff. That's still out in front of them. And they got to win the Alabama game. Because I've never felt more confident they're not beating Georgia with the flaws on this roster. But yeah, to your point, I don't think they're making any sort of deep run into playoffs. Too poor of offensive line and receiver play to make me think they can do that.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. I think that things are still attainable for Tennessee, but there shouldn't be any conversation of playoff talk or anything like that inside the building. Not that I think that there was beforehand, not that I think that's what maybe led to a loss on Saturday against Arkansas, but you're now in a week-to-week mode. You've got to beat Florida to make the Alabama game matter, right? You've got to – I guess the Alabama game is going to be a little bit different. Maybe that is still one of those toss-ups, but actually I guess it's not, to Ryan's point. Tennessee needs to beat Alabama to have that 10-2 that'll be in play. So you need to beat Alabama to then get to the next week. So I think that this team is really in a week-to-week mode. And hey, this is a new era of college football, right? In years past, if you lost to Arkansas, you were waking up on Sunday morning saying, hey, Tennessee's got no shot at the playoffs at all anymore, right? Yeah. That was it. They're done. Now it's a little bit different. You can – I think I want to hear what you have to say. You can lose to Arkansas, but it makes the rest of your games that much more important. And not that they weren't already important before, but I think now it just raises the levels of those other games. Alabama is now a 100% must win, right? There's no question about it. Georgia is going to be in a little bit of the same category. So I think that while Arkansas doesn't destroy your playoff hopes like it would in years past, it does raise the profile of every other game on your schedule because you're done having wiggle room, right? Tennessee now has to beat the teams they need to beat, and they can really only afford probably one more loss if they want to keep that 10-2 record to try to sneak in to one of those final few spots of the playoffs. But I don't think playoffs should be talking about inside the building. I don't think it is, but this team is very much on a week-to-week schedule. Okay, did I cover what you were going to say, or was there still another point?
No. Well, it's just my point as a playoff expansion, not a fan of it. Because, everything you said is accurate. My whole point would be we just got done talking about how Tennessee can't win the national. This is not a team that's good enough to win a national championship. So it's like, to me, who cares if you can't make the playoffs, if you can't win the national championship? Now, I'm not saying fans should feel that way. Certainly, it should still be the goal to make the playoff. But the whole concept of expanding the playoff to give more teams a chance to win is stupid. You don't need to give more teams a chance to win because half the teams that make it will have no prayer of winning, even in a year like this. And Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. That's a team that probably does still have a chance to win. Their season deserves to be over. You lose at Vanderbilt. Deserves to be over from a winning the national championship standpoint. And they're fine. Fair. All it does is give leeway to the very, very best teams. To me, that's all the expanded playoff does.
Well, okay, Ryan, but Alabama beat Georgia. So is Georgia done too? So
yeah, Georgia has one loss, and they lost to a good team. And if Alabama okay. And if Alabama were to win out and win the SEC, I guess in past cases they would still be alive too, and that would be fair. But now Alabama can lose another game and they're still going to make it. And they're just not going to be punished for losing to Vanderbilt.
It is to that Georgia, point. Though. That's a crazy new era we're in.
Why?
Yeah, because they beat
the
Georgia.
Best win.
Okay. They have the worst loss of anybody in the top 10 in the country, too.
So you're more along the lines of you have a bad loss rather than you have a great win. Like, I think wins have a broader spectrum, whereas losses, like, there's not really a such thing as a horrible loss versus a great loss.
I think it's kind of different from the range. Like, if you're a bubble team in the 12-team playoff, I think you're right. Like, who you beat probably matters more than your losses.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, I don't know, to me, that was always the beauty of college football is your season, your chances to win a national championship, you couldn't take a week off. And Alabama took a week off against Vanderbilt, and it doesn't really do anything to it. It does a little bit. Like, it does. It makes their Georgia win matter a whole lot more. But I don't know. Yeah. Beating Georgia as Alabama should just matter on its own. It shouldn't matter whether there's playoff ramifications or not.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah. Right.
I mean, and I say all this, I'm being a massive hater. It's all going to be fun to talk about and fun to watch. I completely agree with that. I just think at the end of the day, the reasons they said that they were doing a playoff were very, very flawed. Now,
that is fair.
They were actually doing a playoff to make money. Yeah, they're going to make a lot of money, and it's going to be good for everybody in that aspect. So that the real reason, yes, they just put it behind this false reason of trying to give more people a chance to win and more people a chance to play meaningful games. When if you're defining meaningful games, what it should be in this realm of conversation is games that decide who would win the national championship. A lot of those games aren't actually going to decide who wins the national championship. They're going to decide who makes a playoff and loses in the first or second game.
All I know is that we are getting phenomenal games right now. I mean, phenomenal. There are times where I am upset.
We got phenomenal games before.
I know, but this has been wild this year.
I will say
it has been. I don't think the playoffs because though.
The fear of expanded playoff or the pushback was that it decreases the significance of regular season games, and while that's still probably true, like the intensity meter of watching Alabama Vanderbilt was still at a freaking 10 when Vandy was about to upset Alabama for everybody.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So
and I think to both of y'all's points, like there's fair ways to justify multiple arguments here. I think to Ryan's point, it does, right? To his point, like it does give leeway to the best teams in the country. But then you also have that kind of seesaw effect where, yes, is it decreasing the, if you have a loss to somebody you shouldn't have, yes, it does kind of, go one way. It does kind of detract it in the sense of, yeah, that's a real bad loss right there. But it also elevates the rest of your season, right? It puts you on a new path to where you now have to be a lot more perfect than you maybe had to beforehand. So I do think that there are, in this here, especially this first season, there are weird ways to kind of justify a lot of different angles. And obviously it's still, we're barely past a third into the season so far. I think we're approaching the halfway point. So there's still a lot more to figure out about how this thing is going to unfold. But I think those are all fair points.
And to Jack's point, because I was one of those people, like it's going to devalue the regular season. And I think to some degree it still does. But I think you're right, Jack, in that the games are all still going to, the vast majority of these big games are all going to still feel just as big. Now, I think like an Ohio State, Michigan last week in a regular season, an SEC championship game that in the past was an elimination game. Those games are going to lose some of its luster. But like games in September and October that were really big games, I don't think it, I might have thought before that it was going to change the feel. I don't think it really is now that I've seen it in practice.
I mean, that game in Tuscaloosa just was electric,
Yeah,
everything about
100%.
it. So. How awesome it was that was on Tennessee's bye week, by the way, you guys. I mean, Tennessee
Fantastic.
playing night games every freaking week, so y'all would have had the conflict, but you got to watch that game in its entirety. Moving on, Florida at Tennessee this weekend. Another night game in Neyland. Tennessee back at home after a long time. Last time Tennessee played at home was Kent State. That was ages ago, it feels like. Of course, that was a massive blowout. Most points scored in program history in the modern era, but Tennessee hosting the Gators. Josh Heupel hasn't had the best, go of it against Florida. Does have one win. That's in Neyland a couple of years ago, the 2022 team. But obviously Tennessee's a much better team than Florida. Florida, big win last week against UCF, but not a great bunch. Billy Napier holding on by a string there in Gainesville. It's a big get-right spot for Tennessee. Ryan, what's your top key to the game here going into this weekend?
There's a number of directions you can go with it. So I'll just say this, and I don't even know if it's my top key, but just a big key is I think Tennessee's offense in particular needs to start fast. Just needs a good start. I think Tennessee needs a good start as a whole to keep. I'm sure the crowd will be revved up from the start, but to keep the crowd very energized, keep the crowd having a big effect, and not allowing the crowd to get negative and kind of have a here we go again vibe. And I think Tennessee's offense just needs some confidence early in this game. I think they need some things to go right to start feeling good, to have Nico playing maybe a little bit looser, letting it rip a little bit more. So a fast start for Tennessee, particularly a good start for the offense. And if it can happen, best case scenario, you make some plays in the passing game early, and you have Nico, feeling confident going forward the rest of the game.
Rick, what's your top key for Tennessee here against the Gators?
Yeah, so I was looking back at some of the ways that Florida has played SEC opponents this year. Mississippi State, even in what is this, a 17-point loss, Mississippi State still ran the ball for 240 yards. Texas A&M, in a 13-point victory over the Gators, they ran for 310 yards. Guys, who is Tennessee's best player? Especially on offense, I think it's number 6, Dylan Sampson. I think that's easy to say. I think this is a game where Tennessee feeds Dylan Sampson to get him the ball to break through that Florida defense. Now, they were better against UCF last week. I do not want to have that point not be said when we're talking about this. But obviously, against SEC opponents so far this year, Florida has showed the ability to kind of get gashed in the run game a little bit. I know that there's a lot of talk about the passing game. I know that Tennessee needs to get that passing game back with a little bit more juice and a little bit more momentum, because Alabama is a week and a half away. And really, as we've talked about so far, we all believe that Georgia game is going to be a very tough hill for Tennessee to climb. That the Alabama game is going to be gigantic. So while I do think that Tennessee has some things to work on before then, I think this is an opportunity where Tennessee can get from start to finish by pounding the running game, by seeing how many yards they can get, by using the best player that they have on their offensive side of the ball, and that is Dylan Sampson. So still think that there's more keys to the game. There's a lot more to talk about, but I think from just a starting how can Tennessee win this game standpoint, I think it's putting the ball on the ground and seeing how many yards you can get that way.
Completely agree. It feels like don't try and get cute in this game. Just make sure. I mean, you have to win, obviously. So Florida is a very vulnerable team defensively, I think. So lean on what you do best, and that's run the ball. I'd like to see, I think everyone would like to see Nico and the receivers have a bounce back game, and the offense as a whole, the passing offense. But at this point, it feels, Ryan, like the offense should run through number 6, and it has. Yeah. For the most part, but that's the strength for this Tennessee team. And to have, because even in the wins, NC State and Oklahoma, it's not like Tennessee's offense played great. Dylan Sampson did, but just for Tennessee to be a really fluid unit, it feels like Sampson has to touch the ball a lot and has to do multiple things in the offense.
100%. And that's the good thing for Tennessee is they're facing a run defense I think is 15th out of 16 in the SEC right now. Like Rick said, better last week against at least a competent UCF team. Certainly not a great one. I mean, maybe some people. Go ahead.
Yeah, RJ Harvey's a good back. 16 for 75 in a TUD is what he had. Of course, UCF was trailing, so game script was bad.
Yeah. But no, that's the encouraging sign, and certainly that's the case. One thing I'll be curious to see, do we see really for the first time all year, I think we might see a lot more design Nico runs in this game. Just because I think there is a feel and how I've always felt, and they did this with Hendon Hooker too. It's always the dilemma is you don't want to run your quarterback and get him hurt, but it's a weapon, and I think you save it for a lot of games you feel like you can get by. I'm sure Arkansas, they felt like they could get by without doing it. And heck, Florida game, they feel they can maybe get by without running Nico. But I think this game has become so important in Tennessee, it's just a must-win game. That I wonder if you see more design runs for Nico, and maybe that in a way can keep Florida's rush defense a little more honest too, in not having all its eyes on number 6.
Ryan, I'm going to try to set you up with a bit of an alley-oop here. But what happens if the quarterback gets hurt? Isn't your season over?
Well, it's over if you lose. I guess is that what we're getting at? Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's such a fine line to running your quarterback to try to tightrope to kind of walk. But this is a game that I think they're going to be could be willing to do it in, and I think you probably have to more against Alabama. Again, I think you can probably get by in this game, and I guess just a long-term look at this team, I still feel pretty good about them in the Florida games and the Kentucky games, certainly the Mississippi State game, just because I think it. I've said this on our post-game pod. I believe at least it's never as bad as it looks. I think Tennessee's offense is going to be better. It's not going to look that bad again. I think being at home will be a big benefit because of what Rick said earlier. They had so many drives in the second half where they ran the ball well, but they starting in 1st and 15, it just put them in a bad spot that it was hard to really, really lean on their run game. And their defense is still so good that unless you can score, those type of teams can score 30 points. I think Tennessee at home is going to be fine. You worry to me more about the Alabamas, the Georgias certainly, who can score 30, and then even Vanderbilt. I haven't done a ton of research on Vanderbilt's defense, but man, that offense, they're good. They're going to put up some points. To me, I worry about those games where the offense has to score more points. So I have a confidence level in Tennessee's defense to not let Florida do a ton in this game, and I think that means Tennessee will be able to lean on its run game and probably do enough offensively to win.
Yeah, I think you look at what Texas A&M did in Gainesville a couple of weeks ago. Marcel Reed got the start, who's a mobile guy, but he had 83 yards on 13 carries and a touchdown. Le'Veon Moss, their top running back, 110 yards on 18 carries. And then Amari Daniels, who's their 1B, 68 yards on 13 carries. So that three-headed monster running the football just ran down Florida's throat in that game. And, of course, that was a huge road win for A&M, dominated the Gators throughout. When you look at these two teams, I think Florida's worse than Arkansas, and it's easy to say now, but I think when you look at the whole season for each team, definitely, Florida's a worse team than Arkansas, and this game is in Neyland, so I think, Tennessee losing to Arkansas, I was so wrong about that game, but it feels like this is not it's a losable game, but it doesn't feel like there's a good chance at all Tennessee loses this game.
Well, as long as
they play to their strengths,
Absolutely. And that's going to be the name of the game for Tennessee a lot this season, right? If Tennessee can play to their own tempo, if they can play to their own standard of physicality, they're a hard team to beat. We've seen that before. The loss to Arkansas doesn't change that. That when Tennessee is rolling and when the quarterback is in sync with the wide receivers, if they're moving fast with tempo, if the defense is allowed to be suffocating and play with pressure, that's the best version of this Tennessee football team. But, I think that you look at this game coming up and there are things that you got to worry about. Tennessee last week, we talked about the explosivity with Taylon Green. Well, how about the two quarterback, system with Florida? So there are things that I think that Tennessee is going to have to lock down and cover. It's also, one thing I heard on a podcast this week. I was trying to find quotes from Steve Spurrier and found this on his show as they were talking about from a Florida-centric perspective about this game. Steve Spurrier said, "Hey, to me, because of the Arkansas win, the door is open for Florida to win this game." His co-host, his name is escaping me off the top of my head. He was a little bit more hesitant. He said, I'm always a little bit worried about a team who's coming off of a loss, though. I do agree with that, but this is also Florida, right? Florida lives in Tennessee's head from time to time. It's not a game where, it's obviously a game that has, controversial moments or just, we've watched a lot of Tennessee-Florida games before. We've seen that. So I also kind of wonder about that dynamic, right? Tennessee is trying to bounce back from a loss, but they're also playing a team who has given them trouble in the past before. So I think there's a lot of interesting dynamics when it comes to this game. But Tennessee is in a good position, especially with this game being at home, especially with this game being at night. There's a lot of things going in the Vols' favors, but they still got to buckle down and do the right things to win this game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Rick, I'll throw it back to you. Tennessee blows out Florida if blank.
Oof. Tennessee blows out Florida if. I think that the passing game would certainly need to find its legs. I think that you would want to score quickly with that passing game. Ryan talked about taking maybe some vertical shots. I think that maybe Tennessee could hit some of those vertical shots, and that helps you get points on the board quickly. And I also think it's just being stifling to a 2-quarterback system, right? Tennessee's defense, again, we know that this is a talented defense that can keep Tennessee in any game throughout the season. You can win an SEC game only giving up 19 points. How does Tennessee's defense sort of approach that? If they are able to be stifling, again, it's just going to give the Vols offense more opportunities. But I think that maybe you got to hit some of those deep pass plays. You got to score quickly. But to me, if Tennessee's going to blow out Florida, I think we're talking about something maybe going a little bit more right in the passing game than we're certainly talking about this week coming out of the Arkansas game.
Ryan, what's your answer?
I'm actually going kind of in the opposite direction. I'll say Tennessee runs for 200 yards. Tennessee can just run the ball at ease in this game and runs right through Florida. I think they'll be able to score enough offensively, and if they're running the ball that well, I think the red zone offense will be good because they can just line up and run it right at Florida. I mean, Tennessee hasn't really been able to pass much in the red zone, but when they've been able just to line it up and run it at people, they've been good in the red zone. So I'll say that. I guess it depends on how you define a blowout. They're maybe not winning by 28 points in that scenario, but they're covering the 2-touchdown spread and winning comfortably. And in one other note, this isn't necessarily on the question, but Rick was just talking about the 2-quarterback system, and we've touched on that a little bit. And our listeners may notice, I always joke that our listeners out there, y'all watch a lot more college football than I do because, we're working games on Saturday. But I didn't realize this until talking to David Waters of Gator Breakdown. That story's on our site now. The 2-quarterback system for Florida has been DJ Lagway playing every third possession. So it's been 2 possessions Graham Mertz, a possession DJ Lagway. So DJ Lagway plays the 3rd, 6th, 9th, 12th, 15th on and on possession of the game, which is very unique. And he kind of said, no matter what the circumstances, 2-minute drill, 4-minute drill, trying to run
situational.
Clock, not situational at all. I think they set that the Mississippi State game. So it's just been 2 games. I guess it's possible they could change it. But obviously they played Mertz the first game. He got hurt. Lagway the whole second game. I think he said it was the A&M game. They went possession for possession. And then Mississippi State and UCF, it's been every third possession for Lagway.
Yeah, I will say Florida hasn't faced much adversity against State or UCF. So maybe if they're trailing, it switches up a tad. But Lagway can throw it, man. He had a throw last week that was just an absolute rope.
They're very different players, which is
I think it
interesting.
May have, how many? Okay, yeah, he had 4 completions, so ain't 100% on the day. 450 Lagway was through the air, so it wouldn't be hard to find. But yeah, one of his completions was just an absolute dart. And of course, Mertz is solid. He's not great, but he's solid. Yeah, I think when you said 200 rushing yards, Ryan, I mean Florida's allowing 173 per game. I think Tennessee should get 200. Honestly. If Nico has any sort of, if he has 20 yards rushing, I think they get there because I'm taking Sampson over 100 for sure. I'm taking Bishop around 50 or more. Nico gets 20 to 30. I think they'll get there just naturally. So,
well, that is the element of the college football rushing numbers where Nico's gonna get sacked.
Yeah, as long as he does,
certainly,
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, and you're right. Maybe that's more attainable, and that's the tough thing about looking at stats this time of year. Not that Florida's just played a murderer's row, but they've had 1 easy game. All their other games they've played
2.
Well, heck, Mississippi State's easy, but they've played more competent opponents than a lot of teams. Yeah, Sanford's the game I was referencing as the easy.
Well, State, I think UCF is not that good. So,
well, I'm not saying these guys are good. Certainly, they're not good. They're competent. They haven't played 3 games against Kent State, Sanford, and Akron at this point.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay, I got you.
And as we said earlier, UCF's run game has been good. Mississippi State, you're right. Mississippi State's such a bad team that it probably doesn't, They did get killed by a MAC team, so they basically are a MAC team.
Right. All right, Rick, Tennessee loses to Florida if blank.
Oh, man, I think we just saw a little bit of the recipe for it, right? If Tennessee struggles to get behind on first down, if penalties are continuously a factor in this game, and to Ryan's credit, some of those, I believe that Tennessee had 7 offensive penalties against Arkansas. 5 of those were on the offensive line. A couple of false starts, I think that's due to crowd noise, but there are some other things like an illegal man downfield that's not necessarily due to that. So I think if Tennessee is not able to clean up some of those marks, if they're not able to get, if the offense is not able to stay on the field very long, again, you're looking at a team who can stay in the game because of their defense. It was 3-0 at halftime, right? Tennessee's defense was still in, and that was one of the worst halves under Josh Heupel that Tennessee has had. Ryan and I talked about it after the game. We said, look, there's been some bad ones. we could spend all night debating which half has been the worst under Tennessee, but they're kind of all in that upper echelon. That's kind of the way that I see it, right? If Tennessee is just not able to get things going, if they're giving Florida the ball, if Florida's able to get things going with this 2-quarterback offense, if they're getting a little bit of swagger that way, and mainly if Tennessee's not able to run the ball. That's, to me, the big thing, right? Even if the passing game isn't working like it wasn't last weekend, even if some things are maybe not operating as efficiently as they can, I still think that Tennessee has enough running game power to be able to stay competitive in this game. And again, of course, with the defense added in as well. But I think you saw the recipe for it last week. If Tennessee were to lose to Florida, I think you're talking about the offensive game and saying, man, what is going on here? Why is nothing able to happen with the passing game? Why are things not able to get going? So that's kind of the way that I see it, a little bit from last week.
Yeah, my answer would be pretty basic, but it's just playing dumb offensively. Like, if Heupel and Halsley go into this game, it's like, we got to get right with Nico and the receivers. Like, we got to get right before Alabama. And they just keep trying to get right, and it keeps not working. And then things get tricky, and if Mertz is having a great day through the air, carving up the Tennessee secondary a little bit, that's how Tennessee loses this game. If they just keep trying things that aren't working in the first half, and then they're down, and then they have to keep going back to that well, and then it spirals. That's how I think this happens, is going into it with the wrong mindset. That's the only way I think Tennessee loses, which could definitely happen.
I'll say mine in two. This one, less of seeing a Tennessee losing this way, but just if Florida's edge rushers, Tyreek Sapp and George Gums, I guess is how you pronounce his name, I'm not really sure. Both those guys are pretty good. They wreak havoc on this game. And obviously we talked a lot about Tennessee's offensive tackle inadequacies. That's a concern, but I don't know if I'd hardly even say I think that's where Tennessee loses, because I think they can do a lot of what we've said of running the ball and be fine. My bigger concern is Tennessee defending the pass. And, I would maybe emphasize being able to get pressure with 4 in this game. If Tennessee's not able to get pressure with 4. Because for the first time all season, we saw Tennessee struggle to do that some against Arkansas. Not that it was horrible. And I think Graham Mertz is the perfect type of quarterback that gives Tennessee issues. And the way Florida calls games with Graham Mertz in a game, because it's very conservative. It's a lot of short stuff over the middle, and that's exactly where we've seen Tennessee's pass defense for a long time struggle. When they're in zone coverage and the linebackers are having to play out in space in the pass game, and we've seen Liam Cohn. It's the Liam Cohn formula. He did it twice at Kentucky, where he just spread everything out, throw a bunch of short stuff, and make the linebackers cover in zone coverage. That would be my concern. What's that?
No, I didn't think the linebackers covered well last week. So.
No, and they didn't. And we saw that happen last week. Arkansas hit the 2 deep passes to Andrew Armstrong. I'll continue to say, you just tipped your cap. Jermon McCoy had good coverage on both those plays. It was just better throws and catches. But we did see Arkansas throw 5 to 12 yards over the middle at the linebackers in zone coverage, and they had a lot of success. And Graham Mertz in Florida they do that a lot to begin with. And I'm sure that'll be a big part of their formula. So that's really, I'd say, the number one thing that worries me for this game for Tennessee. Now, Florida's offensive line, like most offensive lines, has had some struggles this season. Certainly, Tennessee's defensive line is still really good. There's a chance they can completely overwhelm them and take away what they want to do. Take away the ability to do that just by absolutely dominating up front. That's what they did against NC State. It's what they did against Oklahoma. So maybe I would circle that aspect of it as being more important, because I just think if Tennessee's in a lot of zone coverage and if their linebackers are forced to play the pass, they're going to struggle, because it's just not the strength of those players.
Rick, what's your lean for this game? It's a couple touchdown spread. Where are you headed right now as approximate score prediction on this Wednesday?
My lean is towards Tennessee. I do think that this game coming back to Knoxville helps Tennessee right the ship when it comes to how they're going. But there is sort of a big overarching question that I'm wondering. And I hadn't been thinking this all season, and I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill for a comment, but I do go back to Dylan Sampson's lackadaisical comment last week. And I'm not going to sit here and think that Tennessee's team was goofing off and maybe playing Xbox throughout the whole week, and it was that sort of lackadaisical. But I do wonder, what was that game against Arkansas? Was it a little bit of lackadaisical focus during the bye week beforehand, or was it the on-field play that just wasn't up to snuff? I certainly have my theories about this, but I think that it's kind of a fair thing to look through at this week. I want to know how Tennessee responds in this game. I think they have an opportunity to come out and to really get that momentum back on their side. You're coming back to Knoxville. You're playing in front of your home fans. It's going to be a sold-out game. It's going to be under the lights. It's going to be a big-time atmosphere. It's going to be Checker Neyland. It's an opportunity to get a lot of your mojo, swagger, and confidence back. But again, I kind of want to know about how they respond. I think this is a big response moment. How much was that lackadaisical lack of focus? How much did that impact the Arkansas game? How much did just on the field X's and O's? How much impact the game? I have my theories. I think it's a little bit of each, but I want to know how Tennessee responds in this game, coming back to an advantageous situation at home. I lean towards Tennessee. I don't have a prediction like last week to where I might have even a little bit regretted giving it out that early. But I lean towards Tennessee because of the opportunity that they have. But it is saying that Tennessee's got some struggles. So I want to see how they overcome those, how they respond to those, and just what they look like when they come back to Neyland this Saturday.
Ryan?
It's Wednesday morning, and I feel like I've already gone a billion directions in my mind on how I think this game plays out. Certainly there's more paths to Tennessee winning, which, not rocket science given they're 15.5-point favorites. I believe still 15.5-point favorites at the moment. On Wednesday, I'll say something like 27-17 Tennessee.
Close game.
Yeah, I mean, close-ish. I just don't...
10 points?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a close game.
I just don't... Well, I think Tennessee's offense is going to be better. I'm just kind of skeptical that they score more than the low 30s. And maybe they do get there. But I think the defense plays well. I genuinely do think the Florida passing attack presents some issues for what Tennessee does defensively. I'll be interested to see if they play more man in this game. I mean, they certainly seem to trust their corners more this season to play man coverage than they have in the past. So maybe that, they try to take away some more of that short stuff, especially when Mertz is in the game. Now, when Lagway's in the game, you flip it because he throws the ball down the field a lot really well. Hasn't been a great precision passer, but sitting here on Wednesday, that's kind of the realm I'm at.
Yeah. I don't know who I'll pick to cover in the end, but probably Tennessee, honestly. So I just think they're better. It's get right spot. As long as they don't play dumb, they'll win. Defense plays like they've been. This should be a pretty stress-free victory, I think. And man, that Bama game looks... It's funny because before last weekend, it looked so much more interesting because Bama beating Georgia, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a heavyweight battle, game day in town, number 1 versus number 3, maybe
7:00 p.m.
Yeah, Kirk and Fowler on the call, and then now it's the opposite, where Bama loses to Vandy, Tennessee loses to Arkansas. Both teams a little bit more desperate. Tennessee very desperate. It's an elimination game for them, of course. At least I think, not technically, but basically.
Yeah.
So it's just a different style. It's a different type of interesting, but it's still elevated than what it was because both teams lost, if that makes sense. So it's going to be a heck of a third Saturday next weekend, but Tennessee's got to take care of business this weekend against Florida. You can follow Rick Butler. He's at Rick Butler on all socials. Can give Ryan a follow at rshump00. That's SCHUMP on socials. You can also follow me at Jack Foster Media, and of course, follow at Rocky Top Insider on all social media platforms, and also watch us on YouTube over at Rocky Top Insider. Be sure and like and subscribe to the channel. But for Rick, for Ryan, I'm Jack. We'll see you next time.